When the woman who married my father raised her hand to strike me in my mother's kitchen simply because I refused to be her servant, I had a choice. I could swallow the humiliation like I had since I was 18, or I could finally fight back. She thought she was breaking me that night, but she did not realize my silent grandfather had just walked in the door, ready to burn her entire script to the ground. My name is Harper Ellison. Tonight, like too many Saturdays before, I was playing the part of the good daughter in the house my mother decorated, a house that no longer belonged to either of us. It was just after 7 on a damp Midwestern Saturday, the kind of evening that clings to your clothes. This was the mandated family dinner, an invention of my stepmother, Candace, designed to showcase her complete and total ownership of my father, this house, and by extension, me. I was 32 years old, and I still flinched when I pulled into the driveway. I had come straight from work, not even bothering to change. My practical trousers and plain blouse were hidden beneath the gray, pilly hoodie I had grabbed from my apartment floor. It was an old university hoodie, soft from 1,000 washes, and it served as my armor. It was the uniform of someone who did not intend to be seen, who just wanted to fade into the beige-painted walls Candace had insisted on. Everything was beige now. My mother had loved color, deep blues and warm yellows. Candace loved beige, a flat, sterile non-color that sucked the life from the rooms. The kitchen smelled of garlic and oregano, but it was the metallic, slightly sour scent of foil catering trays, not the aroma of actual cooking. Candace did not cook. She curated. She did not host. She directed. She was in the dining room when I walked in, already holding a glass of white wine, gesturing angrily at the caterer who was setting up a buffet line. I specifically said the rosemary chicken, not the lemon. Do you people even read the orders? The caterer, a young woman looking exhausted, just nodded. Yes, ma'am. Candace spotted me. Her eyes, sharp and quick, scanned my outfit. A tiny, satisfied sneer flickered at her lips before being replaced by the bright, brittle mask of the hostess. Harper, finally, you are late. Hang your coat and get in here. The appetizers are not going to serve themselves. She did not ask about my day. She did not ask about the commute. She gave an order. And I, Harper Ellison, a woman with a responsible job in logistics, a woman who managed schedules for an entire fleet of medical transport, immediately obeyed. I found myself in the kitchen, sleeves of the old hoodie instinctively pushed up past my elbows. My work bag was dropped by the back door. Next to the shoes I had kicked off, the muscle memory was humiliating. Within 5 minutes, I was transferring shrimp cocktail from a plastic tub to my mother's crystal bowl. I was wiping a smear of sauce from the white quartz countertop Candace had installed. I moved around the caterers, grabbing a stack of cocktail napkins, arranging crackers on a wooden board. I was invisible, and I was essential. The living room filled. Relatives I saw only at these command performances, my father's sister, Aunt June, who always looked vaguely disappointed in me, her husband, Mark, who only talked about golf, and Candace's guests, the ones who mattered, women with sharp haircuts and men in expensive, casual shirts that smelled like cedar. And my father, Dale Ellison. He was in his throne, the worn leather recliner that was the only piece of furniture Candace had allowed him to keep. He was flicking through sports channels with the remote, the volume just loud enough to create a bubble around himself. He had seen me walk in. He had given me a quick, nervous nod, and then his eyes had slid back to the television screen. He was already gone, checked out for the evening. Candace glided through the room, her voice a theatrical coo, laughing too loudly at a joke, touching an arm here, refilling a glass there. I followed in her wake, the silent attendant, offering the tray of appetizers. "Oh, Harper, dear, thank you," one of Candace's friends said, patting my hand as if I were a golden retriever. I kept my smile fixed, my eyes down. I just had to get through the next 2 hours. 2 hours of servitude, and then I could go back to my tiny, quiet apartment, where the walls were my color and the silence was my own. Then came the step-siblings, Savannah and Jake, Candace's children, now teenagers, sprawled on the sofa my mother had bought. They were monuments to adolescent apathy, faces illuminated by the blue light of their phones. Jake looked up as I passed with the tray. "Yo, Harp, get me a soda while you are up. Coke, lots of ice." "And I need water," Savannah murmured, not looking up from her phone. "Bottled, not the tap?" They did not say please. They never said please. They had learned from their mother that I was not a person who required courtesy. I was a function. I nodded, my throat tightening, and turned back toward the kitchen. The familiar, cold numbness was creeping into my fingers. It was the feeling of being erased, piece by piece. "Harper." Candace's voice cut through the party chatter. It was not her hostess coo. It was sharp. The room quieted instantly. Everyone turned. She was standing by the fireplace, her arms crossed, watching me. She waited until she had everyone's attention. The click of my father's remote stopped. The whole house was silent. She smiled, a thin, cruel slash. She spoke loud enough for the furthest guest to hear clearly. "Harper, from now on, you are the maid. My guests sit. The help clears the plates." It landed exactly as she intended. It was not a joke. It was a public execution. A wave of heat rushed up my neck, flooding my face. I could feel every eye in the room on me. Pity from some, embarrassment from others, amusement from Candace's friends. I looked for my father, a desperate, childish plea. He was staring intently at the television. Though the screen was blank during a channel change, he raised the remote and clicked it again. Click, click. He rubbed his jaw, pretending to be fascinated by a car commercial. He had heard. He had chosen not to. He was hiding in plain sight. Savannah and Jake snickered into their hands. Jake, emboldened, called out again. "Hey, Maid, where's my soda?" I just stood there, rooted to the beige carpet. I could not move. I could not breathe. The tray of half-eaten shrimp felt impossibly heavy. The old paralysis, the dread that lived in my stomach, seized me. It was the feeling of being 18 again, of being trapped, of having nowhere to run. "Harper," Candace's voice was closer. She had crossed the room. The smell of her perfume, something heavy and floral, enveloped me. It smelled like decay. She stopped right in front of me. I was taller than her, but I felt small, hunched inside my hoodie. "Did you hear me?" she hissed, the smile gone, her face tight with a rage that was always simmering just beneath the surface. "You are embarrassing me in front of my guests." I found my voice, but it was just a whisper. "I am not the maid. Candace." It was the wrong thing to say. It was defiance. And defiance was the one thing she could not tolerate. "What did you say to me?" She poked my shoulder with one long, manicured finger, hard. It was a jab, meant to sting. "You live in that sad little apartment because we let you. You eat because we paid for your education." It was a lie. I had paid. I was still paying. "You exist on our charity," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "You will show me respect in my own home." She poked me again. "Now go get the soda and clear these plates before I eat." She did not finish the sentence. She just raised her hand. It was not a fist. It was an open palm, angled for a backhand, aimed right at my face. It was the exact same gesture she had used in the hallway when I was 18, the one that had connected with my jaw and taught me the price of saying no. Time stopped. I saw the ring on her finger. I saw the fury in her eyes. I saw my father, still staring at the TV. I saw the entire room watching, frozen. I braced myself for the impact, for the sting, for the searing humiliation of being struck like a child when I was a 32-year-old woman. Her arm started its downward arc. "Put your hand down, Candace." The voice was not loud, but it had the weight of granite. It was deep, rough with age, and it cut through the room like a blade, stopping her arm mid-swing. Candace froze, her hand hovering in the air. I turned my head. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. Standing in the main doorway, having just walked in from the foyer, was my grandfather. Victor Ellison. He stood tall, though he leaned heavily on an oak cane. He was thin, dressed in an old tweed jacket, and he held a small canvas duffel bag in his other hand. He must have taken a car service from his house 2 hours away. He was not expected. No one had invited him. His eyes, a pale, piercing blue, were not on Candace. They were on her raised hand. They were cold, not angry, colder than anger. It was the cold of absolute certainty. He had arrived silently, and he had been standing there long enough. He had heard the line. He had seen the remote. He had seen the smirks, and he had seen the raised hand. The tableau held for a second. Candace, arm up, frozen in aggression. Me, flinching, holding the tray. My father, finally looking up from his chair, his face pale and slack with shock. Then, Candace shattered the moment. Her arm dropped. The rage vanished, replaced by a smile so wide and bright it looked painful. "Victor!" she shrieked, a sound of pure, false delight. "Oh my goodness! What a wonderful surprise! We had no idea you were coming." She rushed toward him, arms wide for an embrace. The perfect, loving daughter-in-law. Victor did not move. He did not open his arms. He simply held his ground, and she was forced to stop awkwardly, her arms dropping. "We were just playing," Candace stammered, laughing a high, tinny laugh that fooled no one. "Just a silly family joke." She waved a dismissive hand toward me. "Harper knows. She is just so sensitive. This one, always taking things to heart." She tried to take his arm, to guide him in. "Let me get you a drink. Victor, take your coat off. Dale, look who is here." My father was already halfway out of his chair, his face a mask of strained bonhomie. "Dad? Good to see you. Why did not you tell us you were coming?" Victor ignored them both. His gaze shifted from Candace's hand, past my father, and settled directly on me. He did not smile. He did not offer comfort. He just looked. He saw the gray hoodie. He saw the shrimp tray still gripped in my hands. He saw my fingers, and I realized they were shaking, rattling the crystal bowl against the tray. He saw the truth, and he acknowledged it with a slow, deliberate blink. I could not stand the silence. I could not stand the scrutiny. I broke first. I'll go get that soda. Jake," I mumbled, my voice sounding thick. I turned and fled to the kitchen, the humiliation burning my face. I set the tray down with a thud, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter. I heard the sounds of the party restarting behind me, Candace's strained laughter, my father's overly hearty voice, the guests murmuring. I went through the motions. I got the soda. I brought out the trays of catered chicken and lasagna. I refilled wine glasses. I cleared plates. I was the maid again. But something was different. I kept glancing at my grandfather. He had taken a seat in a hardback chair by the wall, away from the comfortable sofas. He had accepted a glass of water, which he held but did not drink. He was quiet, watching. He watched Candace perform. He watched Dale laugh too loudly. He watched Savannah and Jake tapping on their phones. And every few minutes, his eyes would find me. As I leaned over to clear a plate, as I returned to the kitchen with a stack of dishes, I would feel his gaze. It was not pitying, it was assessing. I continued to serve, to swallow the shame, but deep inside, somewhere beneath the years of practiced obedience and numb compliance, something new and cold and sharp had just clicked into place. This was not just another night of being used. This was not just another empty humiliation. His presence, his witnessing, had changed the algebra of the room. The game was still being played, but I had the strangest, most terrifying feeling that the rules had just been rewritten, and my grandfather was the only one holding the pen. The coldness of my grandfather's gaze in that kitchen transported me back. It pulled me out of my 32-year-old body and shoved me violently back into the skin of a girl who had just turned 18. The feeling was so visceral, I could almost smell the bleach and cheap white wine that defined the worst year of my life. It was over a decade ago. My mother had been gone for only 6 months when Candace moved from being the sympathetic neighbor to the woman wearing a white dress in our backyard. My father, Dale, was drowning in a grief he did not know how to navigate. He was a man who needed order, who needed a schedule, and my mother had been the conductor of his life. Without her, he was lost. Candace saw that void and filled it with terrifying efficiency. At first, she played the role of the savior perfectly. She arrived with covered dishes and soft tones. She told me I was so strong and so resilient while I sat on the porch, staring at nothing. She organized the funeral flowers. She wrote the thank you cards because my father's hands shook too much to hold a pen. She was the architect of our recovery, or so it seemed. But the moment the wedding band slid onto her finger, the temperature in the house dropped 10 degrees. It started with the furniture. "We need to move forward," she told my father, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. "For Harper's sake, we cannot live in a mausoleum." So, my mother's floral armchair went to the curb. The yellow curtains were replaced with heavy, beige drapes that blocked out the sun. The house stopped smelling like vanilla and started smelling like antiseptic. Then came the chores. Before Candace, I had regular responsibilities. I cleaned my room. I did the dishes after dinner. I mowed the lawn. Normal things. But within weeks of the wedding, helping out mutated into service. It was subtle. It began with her leaving a laundry basket outside my door. "I am just so swamped with the transition. Sweetie," she would say, "could you just run a load?" Then it was, "Oh, Harper, since you are home first from school, just get the chicken started." By the time 2 months had passed, there was a list, a physical, laminated list on the refrigerator, written in her looping, aggressive handwriting. Vacuum living room, daily. Scrub guest bath, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Iron Dale's shirts. Prep dinner components. I was a senior in high school. I was taking AP classes. I was working 20 hours a week at the grocery store to save for college. And suddenly, I was also running a household for 2 capable adults. The line between daughter and servant didn't blur. It was erased. If I closed a cabinet door a little too hard, Candace would appear from nowhere, her voice low and dangerous. "We do not slam things in this house. Show some respect for the things your father works for." If I left a water glass in the sink to soak, I would get a 20-minute lecture on laziness and entitlement. But I took it. I took it because I looked at my father and saw a man who finally looked well-fed and ironed. I took it because I thought this was the price of his happiness. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I was quiet enough, we would be a family again. Then came my 18th birthday. It was a Tuesday in November. I remember the date because the air was biting cold and the sky was a flat, iron gray. I had requested the night off from the grocery store 2 weeks in advance. I did not expect a party. I did not expect a car. All I wanted was to go to the cheap movie theater with my 2 best friends, eat popcorn for dinner, and forget for 3 hours that my mother was dead and my house was a prison. I came home from school at 3 o'clock, dropping my backpack by the door, feeling a rare flicker of lightness. Candace was in the hallway. She was wearing her hosting face, makeup perfect, hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde stillness. "Good, you are here," she said, not looking at me, checking a list on her clipboard. "I need you to vacuum the baseboards in the dining room and then start the appetizers. The puff pastry needs to thaw." I blinked, confused. "What? What appetizers?" She looked up, annoyed that I was speaking. "Dale's partners are coming for drinks and heavy appetizers at 7. It is a very important networking opportunity." "But it is my birthday," I said. The words felt childish as they left my mouth. "I have plans. I am going to the movies with Sarah and Jen." Candace laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, devoid of humor. "Don't be ridiculous. You are 18 now. You don't need birthday parties. Your father needs this night to go well. Cancel your friends." She turned her back on me, dismissing me like I was a stubborn appliance. Something inside me snapped. It was the first time the anger outweighed the grief. "No," I said. Candace stopped. She turned around slowly. "Excuse me?" I stood my ground, though my knees were shaking inside my jeans. "No, I am 18. I am an adult. I am not the maid. I will clean the baseboards tomorrow. I am going out." I turned to grab my keys from the hook. I never reached them. She moved faster than I thought possible. One moment she was 5 feet away. The next she was on top of me. Her hand clamped around my wrist, her fingers digging into the tender flesh between the bones. She spun me around and shoved me backward. My back hit the hallway wall with a hollow thud that knocked the wind out of me. We were in the narrow corridor between the kitchen and the living room. A blind spot. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little brat," she hissed, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were wide, manic. This wasn't parental discipline. This was hatred. "You think because you turned 18 you are special? You are nothing." "Let go of me," I gasped, trying to wrench my wrist free. She slapped me. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was hard, open-palmed, a crack of skin against skin that made my ear ring. My head snapped to the side. Before I could process the shock, she hit me again, backhanded this time. Her ring caught my cheekbone. "You live here because I allow it," she screamed, her voice losing its control. "You eat the food I buy. You sleep in the bed I make. If you want a roof over your head, you pay your way." She shoved me again, pinning me against the drywall. My cheek was burning, throbbing with a pulse of its own. "You are going to clean this house," she snarled, spitting the words at me. "You are going to serve the guests, and you are going to smile, because if you walk out that door, Harper, do not bother coming back. You have nowhere to go. A girl like you will crawl back home in a week." The front door opened. "Honey, I am home." It was my father. Candace released me instantly, in the span of a single second. She transformed. Her shoulders slumped, her face crumpled. She brought her hands to her face and let out a sob. "Oh, Dale!" she cried out, her voice trembling. My father walked into the hallway, smiling, carrying his briefcase. He stopped when he saw us, me, pressed against the wall, clutching my stinging cheek, eyes wide with shock. Candace, weeping into her hands. "What is going on?" he asked, looking between us. I just asked her to help with the party," Candace sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I know it is her birthday, and I had a gift planned, but she just exploded, Dale. She started screaming that she hates us, that she wishes I was dead." "That is a lie," I shouted, my voice cracking. "She hit me. Dad, look at me. She hit me." I moved my hand to show him my cheek. It was already turning red. Dale looked at my face, then he looked at his wife, who was now dissolving into hiccups, looking small and fragile. He looked at me. "Harper, lower your voice." "She hit me," I repeated, desperate. "She grabbed me. Look at my wrist." I held up my arm. The red marks of her fingers were already rising. Candace wailed louder. "I tried to stop her. She was throwing things. She was hysterical. I had to restrain her. Dale, she was going to hurt herself." Dale closed his eyes and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked tired. He didn't want to deal with a crisis. He wanted his dinner. He wanted his peace. When he opened his eyes, he didn't look at my injuries. He looked at me with disappointment. "Harper," he said, his voice heavy, "I know you are still grieving. I know this year has been hard. But you cannot take it out on Candace. She has done nothing but try to love you." "Dad," I whispered, the betrayal hitting harder than the slap. "She is lying." "Go to your room," he said. "Just go to your room. Make yourself presentable. We have guests coming in an hour." He put his arm around Candace, cooing to her, leading her into the kitchen to get her a glass of water. I stood alone in the hallway. My face was on fire. My wrist was throbbing. But the real injury was the hole in my chest where my father used to be. I didn't go to the movies. I didn't go to my room. I went to the bathroom. splashed cold water on my face, applied a layer of heavy concealer over the red mark on my cheek, and I went downstairs. I vacuumed the baseboards. I baked the puff pastry. I served drinks to men in suits who didn't know my name. That night, I learned the lesson Candace wanted to teach me. The truth doesn't matter. Power matters. And in that house, I had none. The next afternoon, my grandfather Victor stopped by. It was rare for him to come unannounced. He lived an hour away then, and he and Dale had a strained relationship, but he had come to drop off a birthday card. I was on the front porch, sweeping leaves. It was another chore on the list. Victor walked up the path, his cane tapping against the concrete. He stopped when he saw me. "Happy birthday, kid," he said, his voice gruff. "Thanks, Grandpa." I didn't look up. I kept sweeping. "Look at me when I talk to you, Harper." I hesitated, then lifted my head. The daylight was unforgiving. The concealer I had applied that morning wasn't enough to hide the slight swelling on my cheekbone. And as I gripped the broom, my sleeve rode up, revealing the dark purple bruises in the shape of fingerprints around my wrist. Victor's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, moving faster than I expected. He reached out and took my hand, gently, so gently, and pulled my arm up to inspect the bruises. His thumb traced the outline of the mark. His skin was rough, like sandpaper, but his touch was kind. "Who did this?" he asked. His voice was very quiet. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream it. "She did it. She hurts me. Dad doesn't care. Take me with you." But shame is a powerful silencer. I was ashamed that I had let it happen. I was ashamed that my father hadn't protected me, and I was terrified that if I told Victor, he would confront Dale, and Dale would choose Candace again, and I would be left with nothing. No family, no home, nowhere to go. Candace's voice echoed in my head. "You will crawl back." I pulled my hand away. Victor stared at me. He looked at the bruise again. He looked at my eyes. He knew. I could see it in his face. He knew that wasn't a stair-railing bruise. That was a grip. "You slipped," he repeated, flatly. "Yes," I said, staring at my shoes. "I am clumsy. You know that." He stood there for a long time. The wind rustled the dry leaves around us. I held my breath, waiting for him to call me out, waiting for him to save me. But he didn't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope. "Happy birthday," he said again. He pressed the envelope into my hand. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. He didn't go inside to see Dale. He didn't say goodbye. He just left. I watched him drive away, clutching the envelope. Inside was a check for $100. That night, I made a plan. I would work. I would save every penny. I would endure the list, the insults, the erasure of my existence until I had enough money to leave and never look back. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was just biding my time. But abuse is a slow-acting poison. It doesn't just hurt your body, it rewires your brain. Weeks turned into months. Candace's requests became demands. The phrase, "You are the maid," wasn't spoken aloud yet, but it was written in every interaction. It was in the way they left their dishes on the table, expecting them to vanish. It was in the way they walked past me while I was scrubbing the floor, stepping over my legs like I was a piece of furniture. It was in the way my birthday was never celebrated again. I graduated high school. I stayed for college because Dale said they couldn't afford for me to go away, and I felt guilty leaving them with the burden of my existence. The temporary arrangement became permanent. The trap closed around me, not with a bang, but with the soft, suffocating click of a lock I didn't have the key to. I learned to be invisible. I learned that love was transactional. I learned that if I wanted a hug, I would get a rag instead, and I learned to accept it. Until tonight, until Victor stood in the doorway and told her to put her hand down. Standing in the kitchen now, 32 years old, staring at the shrimp tray, I realized that the 18-year-old girl who lied about the bruises was still inside me, but she wasn't scared anymore. She was furious, and for the first time in 14 years, she wasn't alone. The memory of that slap at 18 became the foundation for the next 14 years of my life. It was the silent, unacknowledged contract I had signed in my own blood and shame. The physical violence receded because it was no longer necessary. Candace had found a more effective and more respectable tool: my bank account. I enrolled in the state university, the one a 45-minute bus ride away. It was the only choice. "It is just so practical." "Harper," my father said, relief washing over his face when I told him. "Living at home, you will save a fortune. Smart girl." Candace, of course, framed it differently. "You should be thanking your father every day," she said over dinner, passing me the potatoes I had cooked. "Most kids would kill for a free ride. No rent, no food bills. You are a very lucky young woman." Her words painted a picture of me as a coddled beneficiary, a freeloader. It neatly erased the reality that I was still doing the laundry for a family of 5, scrubbing all the bathrooms, and cooking dinner 4 nights a week. I was working 30 hours a week at a work-study job in the university's admissions office, and my rent was paid in full, in labor, every single day. My paychecks, direct deposited into the bank account I had opened when I was 16, became a communal resource I had no control over. The emergencies started small. "Harper, thank God you are home," Candace would say, meeting me at the door with a distressed look. "The dishwasher just flooded the kitchen. I had to call a plumber, and he wants $150 cash." I would sigh, my shoulders slumping under the weight of my backpack. "Okay, let me get my wallet." A month later, it was, "Savannah's recital costume is just outrageous. $200 for some sequins and tulle, but she will be heartbroken if she is the only one. You have some birthday money left, right?" I did not. The birthday money from my grandfather was long gone, but my paycheck had just cleared. "Yes, I can cover it." It was always cover. It was always help out. It was always borrow. A word that lost all meaning because there was never any mention of repayment. Candace was a master of psychological warfare. She wrapped the exploitation in the language of praise, training me to feel proud of my own servitude. "I just do not know what we would do without you. Harper," she would say, watching me balance my accounting textbook on my lap while I folded Jake's socks. "You are the responsible one, so much more reliable than, well, you know." She would pair this praise with a subtle dig at the life I was not living. "Sarah called for you," she might mention. "Some party? I told her you were too busy studying. It is just so wonderful you are so focused. You do not have time for all that silly boy drama, do you?" I did not. I did not have time for friends. I did not have time for movies. I did not have time for dates. My life was a closed loop. Wake up at 6, catch the 7:15 bus, class, work, study, bus home at 6, cook, clean, study, sleep. Any deviation was a betrayal of the family's needs. The car fund was the first major dream I had to kill. For 2 years. I had been siphoning off $20 or $30 a week from my job at the grocery store, and then the admissions office, into a separate savings account. It was my escape fund, though I only called it my car fund. It was approaching $3,000. It was a 1990s Honda Civic. In my mind, it was freedom. Then my father's transmission failed. It is catastrophic." "Harper," he said, sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. He was speaking to me, but he was performing for Candace, who was rubbing his back, her face a mask of tragic concern. "The mechanic says it is almost $4,000. We do not have it. I might have to take a loan against the house." Candace looked at me, her eyes wide with manufactured panic. "Oh, Dale, no, not the house." She turned her gaze to me. "Harper, sweetie, you have your savings, your car money. This is your father's livelihood." I looked at my dad, his face gray with stress. He looked old. He looked beaten. The man who had taught me to ride a bike was gone, replaced by this hollow shell. How much do you need? I asked, my voice flat. I drained the account the next morning, $3,214. I took the bus to the mechanic and paid him directly. My father hugged me, his relief palpable. You are a lifesaver. Harp, I will pay you back. I swear, every penny. He never did. I took the bus for another 2 years. I got very good at reading textbooks while standing in a crowded aisle, my breath fogging in the winter air at the bus stop. The one time I tried to say no, the steel trap snapped shut. Jake, now 14, wanted to go to a 2-week, obscenely expensive basketball camp. Candace, as usual, presented it as a non-negotiable family expense. It is only $800, Harper, and it is an investment in his future, she said. I cannot, I said, my heart pounding. I have to buy my textbooks for the fall semester. They are almost $500 this year. Candace's face did not change, but her eyes went cold. It was the same look from the hallway. That is a shame, she said lightly. A real shame. We have been trying so hard to make sure we could cover our half of your tuition this year, but with Dale's hours cut back, I just do not know if we can swing it if we are the only ones making sacrifices. The threat was clear. My education, the one thing I thought was mine, was just another lever she could pull. If I did not pay for the camp, she would make sure my father pulled his support for my tuition. I bought the textbooks on a credit card. I paid for the basketball camp. The credit card debt hung over me for a year, the interest compounding the humiliation. Meanwhile, the disparity in the house was staggering. Savannah received a brand new laptop for her 16th birthday. Jake got the latest gaming console just because he seemed blue. Their birthdays were events, with catering and balloons and piles of gifts. When I graduated from college, summa cum laude in healthcare administration, I got a congratulations text from my father. Candace forgot the date entirely. There was no party. There was no dinner. There was no gift. I bought myself a cupcake from the campus bakery and ate it on the long bus ride home, my graduation gown in a plastic bag on my lap. Grandpa Victor was the only one who remembered. A card would arrive every November for my birthday, and one in May for my graduation. Inside was always a check, $50 or $100. The memo line always said the same thing. For you, do not let them take it. I would deposit the check, and that very week, an emergency would happen. The water heater would break. Savannah would need new glasses. The property tax bill would be surprisingly high. The money was never for me. It was just another drop in the bucket of their need, a bucket that had no bottom. Candace had perfected the art of weaponizing guilt. Family helps family was her mantra. She said it when she handed me the electric bill. She said it when she reminded me to pick up her dry cleaning. She said it when she asked me to use my employee discount to buy her new shoes. It was a brilliant trap. Every time I paid a bill, I was helping the family. Every time I hesitated, I was selfish, ungrateful, and disloyal. Then, I got my first real job. Silverline Care Systems, a starter position as a logistics coordinator. It was a real salary. It had benefits. It was my ticket out. I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment across town, in a building with paper-thin walls and a chronically broken elevator. The day I moved out, Candace cried. I just do not understand why you are abandoning us, she wept, holding my hand. We love having you here. I am 23, Candace, I said, pulling my hand away. It is time. I thought moving out would set the boundary. I was wrong. It just made me an ATM with a new address. The phone calls started within a week. Now that I was not there to pay in labor, I was expected to pay in cash. Harper, the property tax bill is due. We are just a few hundred short. Harper, Jake's car insurance has gone up again. Harper, we would love to have you for dinner. Can you pick up a few bottles of wine and a prime rib? I paid. I paid because I was trained. I paid because the guilt was so deeply ingrained that no felt like a declaration of war. I paid because I was still that 18-year-old girl in the hallway, desperate for a kind word from my father, who would only give it to me when I was writing a check. Living alone was not the freedom I imagined. It was just a quieter, lonelier cage. My paycheck vanished before it even hit my account, siphoned off by their endless, relentless need. My old boyfriend, the one I had tried to date for 6 months, had broken up with me over it. "You are not in a relationship with me, Harper," he had said, not unkindly. "You are in a relationship with your family's debt. You are married to their problems." He was right. The overt violence of that night was gone. Candace never raised her hand to me again. She did not need to. She had my bank account number. She would use public humiliation, little barbs at family dinners, and biting sarcasm to remind me of my place. But the real work was done by the memory of that slap. It was the ghost in the room, the unspoken threat that kept me obedient, compliant, and above all, profitable. Which brings me to tonight. I am 32 years old. I am an operations coordinator at Silverline Care Systems, a job I am, against all odds, very good at. I live in a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, the one with the broken elevator. It is quiet. It is mine. And it is where I live a life suspended, a life on hold. My bank account is a battlefield. I pay my rent. I pay my car note. For a sensible 6-year-old sedan, I pay my utilities, and then I pay theirs. The transfers are automatic now, set up under the guise of temporary help that has lasted for 9 years, $200 on the 1st of the month, labeled utilities, another $150 on the 15th, labeled groceries. But the automated payments are never enough. The texts from my father are a constant, low-level hum of anxiety in my pocket. "Harp, electric bill was a shocker this month. Any chance you can spot us an extra $75? Harp, Savannah needs new tires for her car. Just until I get my next check. Harp, Jake's tuition payment is due. We are a little short." I always send it. I send it because saying no would require a confrontation I do not have the energy for. I send it because it is easier to be poor than to be ungrateful. I send it because, as my last boyfriend, Kevin, told me right before he walked out of my life, "You are already married. Harper, you are married to their problems, and there is no room for anyone else in that relationship." He had said it 3 years ago, and the words still echo in my apartment when it gets too quiet. He was right. I am stuck, a financial and emotional caretaker, trapped by a sense of duty that feels more like a life sentence. My only other connection to that family, the only one that doesn't feel like sandpaper, is Victor. After a minor stroke about 3 years ago, he moved into a small, manageable house about 2 hours north. Candace and my father immediately began pushing the narrative that he was slipping. "He is just so confused. Poor thing," Candace would say with a sad sigh. "Dale really should take over his finances, just to protect him." But when I call him, which I do every Sunday night, he is not confused. He sounds old, his voice thinner, but his mind is a steel trap. He asks about my work at Silverline, specific questions about transport routes. He talks about the news. He complains about the price of good coffee. He is not confused. He is just old, and he is isolated, and I am the only one who seems to notice. Then, last Tuesday, the summons arrived, a text from Candace. "Family dinner this Saturday at 7. Be here at 6 to help me get ready." Not "can you come?" Not "I would love your help." It was an order, disguised as an invitation. "Help me get ready" was her code for "you are the kitchen staff." So here I am, pulling up to the house at 5:58 p.m. on a Saturday. I am wearing my armor, the old gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. I am carrying a canvas bag with 2 bottles of decent wine and a box of artisan chocolates. A hostess gift that is really just another tax. I walk in the back door, into the kitchen, and the scene that greets me is my first humiliation of the evening. Candace is leaning against the gleaming quartz countertop, a glass of white wine already in her hand. She is wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater. The kitchen is spotless. It smells like lemon oil and, faintly, the foil-wrapped catering trays stacked neatly on the counter. There is not a single dish to be washed, not a vegetable to be chopped. "Oh, good, you are here," she says, not moving. "I had to let the cleaning service go early. Harper, they charge an absolute fortune for weekends. It is criminal. I figured, why pay them when family can just pitch in, right?" She pushes herself off the counter, walks to the pantry, and pulls out a spray bottle of Windex and a roll of paper towels. She hands them to me. "Just give the dining room table a good polish, will you? And the sideboard. I think they left streaks." I look at her. I look at the Windex. The table is a long, dark wood rectangle, and from here, I can see my own reflection in its perfect, unstreaked surface. The cleaning crew had been here. They had finished. She had sent them away so I would have a job to do, to remind me of my place. "Family helps family," she adds, smiling, and turns back to her wine. I take the bottle and the paper towels. I go into the dining room. I spray the perfectly clean table, and I wipe it down. The repetitive, circular motion is grimly familiar. I am 32 years old. I coordinate critical medical deliveries, and I am wiping down a clean table, on command, because I am too tired to fight. At 6:30, Savannah and Jake thunder down the stairs. They are 17 and 19 now, fully formed creatures of their mother's design. They walk right past me in the dining room, hands empty. "Mom, is the food here?" Jake yells, yanking open the refrigerator. "Do not touch that. It is for the guests," Candace snaps. "Savannah, how was the library?" "Ugh, so boring," Savannah says, collapsing onto the living room sofa and immediately burying her face in her phone. "That internship is slave labor." Candace laughs, a fond, indulgent sound. "Well, it will look wonderful on your applications. Honey, your father and I are so proud of your work ethic." I pause my wiping. Savannah's internship at her friend's father's law firm is unpaid. It is 3 hours a week of filing papers. I know this because the gas money for her to get there comes from one of my temporary transfers. "Speaking of work," I say, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the room, I got a promotion at Silverline last week. I am an operations coordinator now." Candace is busy inspecting a wine glass for spots. "Oh, that is nice, dear." She doesn't look up. "Jake, be a doll and put some music on. Something classy." My promotion, the thing I have worked for 18 months, is dismissed with the same importance as a weather report. My face flushes, hot with shame. I crumple the paper towel and go back to the kitchen. The guests arrive at 7. The chatter fills the house. I am in motion. The silent automaton. I bring out the catered appetizers. I pour wine. I clear cocktail napkins. And my father, Dale, sits in his recliner, beaming. He loves this. He loves playing the part of the successful patriarch, presiding over his beautiful home and his blended family, all of it held together by Candace's iron will and my invisible money. He is talking to his brother-in-law. Mark, I am nearby, refilling a bowl of mixed nuts. It is a lot, you know? Dale is saying, gesturing with his beer. Candace has this place running like a Swiss watch, and the kids, Savannah with her pre-law internship, Jake is a literal social media wizard. I do not know how they do it. You have got a good team, Mark says, clapping him on the shoulder. Dale laughs. He sees me out of the corner of his eye, the dutiful daughter in her gray hoodie, holding the nut bowl. And we have Harper. Of course, he says, his voice booming with false cheer. He winks at Mark. She is the practical one. God bless her. Harper knows her way around a mop and a spreadsheet. Probably the mop a little better, eh? Harp? The men laugh. It is a light, dismissive chuckle, the sound of a joke made at the expense of the help. I freeze. The room seems to tilt. The mop a little better. He does not know what I do. He has no idea what my job entails. He just sees the girl who cleans his house, the girl who pays his bills. He does not see the woman. He does not see me. And he just announced it to a room full of people. In that moment of absolute, searing humiliation, as I am trying to remember how to breathe, a draft of cold air hits my back. The front door, the one that always sticks, has been pushed open, just a crack. Unnoticed by the laughing men in the living room, unseen by Candace holding court by the fireplace, a figure steps inside. My grandfather, Victor Ellison. He has a car service idling in the drive. He is early. He leans on his oak cane, and he stands in the shadows of the foyer, his old tweed coat still buttoned. He takes in the scene. He sees the party. He sees me, standing frozen, my face pale. He sees my father, laughing with the other men. He is not confused. His eyes are perfectly, chillingly clear. He has been here for less than 30 seconds, and he has already heard enough. Candace, oblivious, spots me standing still by the snack table. My stillness, my sudden lack of function, irritates her. The party's gears are grinding because one cog has stopped moving. She sets her wineglass down with a sharp click and begins to walk toward me. Her face is a mask of hostess concern, but her eyes are furious. This is an interruption. This is a problem. She stops in front of me. She doesn't see Victor, who is still standing in the unlit entryway, watching. She decides, in this moment, to reassert her dominance, to put the maid back in her place. "Harper," she says, her voice loud enough for the room to quiet. "From now on, you are the maid. My guests sit. The help clears the plates." She is smiling as she says it, but it is the smile of a predator. And when I just stare at her, speechless from my father's joke, she takes my silence as defiance. "Did you hear me?" she hisses. And she raises her hand, the same hand that struck me when I was 18, angled for the same exact blow. The room holds its breath. My father has finally turned, his smile fading. Before the hand can fall, a voice, deep and resonant with age, cuts through the room like a judgment. "Put your hand down, Candace." Victor steps out of the shadows and into the light. Candace freezes, her arm trembling in the air. And I look at him, this man I had lied to 14 years ago to protect myself, and I realize, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that he just saw it. He saw everything. He saw the joke. He saw the command. He saw the threat. For the first time in my adult life, I have a witness. The silence that descended on the house after the last car door slammed was heavy, but for the first time in years, it did not feel empty. It felt like the silence before a thunderstorm breaks. I had volunteered to stay behind and finish the cleanup. It was a tactical decision, a desperate attempt to avoid the awkward, suffocating goodbyes in the foyer where Candace would inevitably make one last passive-aggressive comment about my outfit or my attitude. I told them to go ahead. I told them I wanted to make sure the crystal was washed by hand so the cleaning crew would not chip it on Monday. It was the kind of martyr-like excuse Candace loved, so she accepted it without hesitation. Victor had played his part with a master's touch. As Dale was fumbling with his car keys, looking anxiously at the darkened windows of the house, Victor had placed a hand on his shoulder. He told Dale to take Candace and the kids home, that he wanted to sit in the old house for a quiet hour, just to remember how my mother had kept it. He said he had arranged a late car to pick him up. He played the sentimental old man card so perfectly that Dale, relieved to escape the tension of the evening, practically ran to his SUV. I heard the engine fade down the street. I was alone in the kitchen. The room was dim. I had turned off the harsh overhead recessed lights, leaving only the warm, yellow glow of the under-cabinet lighting. It was intimate, almost confessional. I stood at the deep farmhouse sink, my hands submerged in hot, soapy water, scrubbing the baked-on cheese from a lasagna pan. The water was scalding, turning my skin a raw, angry red. But I did not pull my hands out. The physical sting felt grounding. It was real. It was something I could control. I heard the slow, rhythmic tap of the cane against the hardwood floor before I saw him. Victor entered the kitchen. He did not look frail tonight. In the low light, the lines on his face looked like chiseled stone. He placed his canvas bag on the pristine quartz island and leaned his cane against the counter. He did not sit down. He stood there, watching my back, watching the frantic, repetitive motion of my scrubbing. He did not say hello. He did not ask if I was tired. He asked a question that cut through 14 years of silence. "How long have they talked to you like that, Harper?" His voice was low, devoid of the tremor that usually accompanied his age. It was a prosecutor's voice. I froze. The sponge stopped moving against the ceramic. I stared at the bubbles popping on the surface of the water. My instinct, honed by a decade of survival, was to deflect, to say it was just a joke, to say he was misinterpreting their humor, to say it was fine. But then I remembered the look in Candace's eyes when she raised her hand an hour ago. I remembered the laughter of the men in the living room. I remembered the check I had written last week for Savannah's emergency trip expenses. I turned off the faucet. I dried my hands on a dish towel, taking my time, keeping my back to him for 1 second longer. When I finally turned around, I was exhausted, not sleepy, but deep in the bone weary. I looked him in the eye. "Since I was 18, I said. The truth hung in the air between us. Once the seal was broken, everything I had held back came pouring out. It was not a scream. It was a quiet, steady stream of facts. I told him about the night of my 18th birthday. I told him about the party being canceled so I could serve hors d'oeuvres. I told him about saying no. I told him about the hallway, the grip on my wrist, the slap that still echoed in my nightmares, and the threat that had followed it. She told me I would crawl back. I said, my voice steady but my hands trembling against the counter. She told me I had to pay for the space I took up. Victor listened. He did not interrupt. He did not gasp, but I saw his physical reaction. His hand, resting on the head of his cane, tightened until his knuckles were white, his jaw set hard, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He was absorbing the poison I had been drinking alone for years. I did not stop there. I told him about the loans. I told him about the car repair that drained my escape fund. I told him about the tuition threats. I told him about the Maid comments that started as jokes and became policy. I told him about Savannah's braces, Jake's gaming console, the groceries, the electric bills, the tires, the vacations I funded but was never invited to. I told him how ashamed I was. "That is the worst part, Grandpa," I confessed, looking down at the floor. "I am a 32-year-old woman who manages a logistics fleet. I can route 50 ambulances through a blizzard, but I cannot say no to my father when he asks for $200. I feel like I am their accomplice. I feel like I let them do it." Victor shifted his weight. His eyes were incredibly sad, but there was a fire behind them I had not seen in a long time. "You have records?" he asked. I looked up, surprised. "Records?" "You are a logistics manager, Harper. You do not run things on feelings. You run them on data. Do you have records?" I hesitated. It felt like revealing a dirty secret. For years, keeping track of the money felt like an act of betrayal, a petty scorecard kept by an ungrateful daughter. But I nodded. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and navigated to the cloud drive, opening a file simply named Ledger. I walked over to the island and placed the phone in front of him. "I started it when I was 22. I said, I went back through my bank statements and reconstructed everything from before that. Every transfer, every cash withdrawal they asked for, every bill paid directly." Victor leaned over the phone. He swiped through the screen with a shaking finger. He saw the columns: date, amount, reason given, actual usage. January 12th, $300. Reason: heating bill. Actual usage: Candace's spa weekend. March 4th, $500. Reason: Dale's car insurance. Actual usage: down payment on Jake's dirt bike. The list scrolled down and down, thousands upon thousands of dollars, a slow, bleeding wound that had kept me in a one-bedroom apartment with a broken elevator while they renovated their kitchen. Victor stared at the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet. It was a number that could have been a down payment on a house, It was my freedom, quantified. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep, rattling breath. Then, without a word, he reached into his canvas bag. He pulled out a worn, leather-bound notebook. It was old. The leather cracked at the spine. He placed it on the counter next to my glowing phone. "I opened this after my stroke," he said softly. "I was checking my own accounts. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was losing my memory, just like Candace kept telling everyone." He opened the notebook. His handwriting was shaky, but legible. It was a ledger, just like mine. I looked at the pages. August 15th, withdrawal. $1,000, note from Dale. Harper is in trouble with rent. Dad, she needs help. October 2nd, withdrawal. $600. Note from Candace. Harper's car broke down again. She is crying. Victor, we have to help her. My stomach dropped. The room spun. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. They told you the money was for me?" I whispered. Victor nodded grimly. "They told me you were struggling. They told me you were drowning. They said you were too proud to ask me yourself. So they were acting as intermediaries." He turned the book to face me, tapping a date with his finger. "Look at this date. Harper, November 10th, last year." I looked at his notebook. November 10th, withdrawal. $800 for Harper's medical bills. I looked at my phone. I scrolled to November 10th. November 10th, transfer to Dale, $400. Reason: Grandpa Victor needs special medication not covered by insurance. A strangled sound escaped my throat. It was half laugh, half sob. "They played us both," Victor said, his voice hard as iron. "They took money from me in your name, and they took money from you in my name. They have been bleeding us both dry and using our love for each other to do it." He looked at the notebook, then at me. "I suspected," he said, "after the stroke. When my head cleared, I started to wonder. You never mentioned the crises they talked about. You never thanked me for the help, which was not like you. But I was scared. Harper, I am an old man. I live alone. If I confronted them and I was wrong, or if I was right and they cut me off, I would lose the only family I had left." He reached out and covered my hand with his. His skin was dry and papery, but his grip was strong. "I was a coward," he said. "I let them isolate me. I let them convince me I was confused. I let them convince me you were a failure who needed constant rescuing." He paused, and his eyes locked onto mine. "But tonight, when I walked in that door and saw her raise her hand to you, when I saw you flinch, I knew it was not the first time. I knew every lie they told me was poison, and I knew I had waited too long." He straightened up, pulling his hand back, and reached for his bag again. "I saw a lawyer 3 months ago. Harper, I changed my will. I moved the liquid assets. I thought that was enough. I thought I would just leave everything to you when I died, and let that be my revenge." He shook his head. "But that is not enough. Not after tonight. Not after seeing this spreadsheet. They are not just greedy. They are predators. And you do not leave predators alone to wait for you to die. You stop them." He looked at the time on the microwave. It was nearly midnight. "We are going to finish this, Harper, but we are going to do it my way. You are going to go home tonight. You are going to stop every automatic payment. You are going to change your passwords. And tomorrow morning, you are going to come to my house. Bring this phone. Bring every receipt you can find." He picked up his cane, his posture straighter than I had seen it in years. "I have a trust to set up, and I have a son and daughter-in-law who are about to learn that the bank of Victor Ellison is not just closed, it is under new management." I looked at him. This man I thought I had lost to age and distance, and I saw the grandfather who used to carry me on his shoulders. He was back, and for the first time in 14 years, the crushing weight on my own shoulders began to lift. "I am in," I said. Victor nodded. He walked to the back door, stopping with his hand on the latch. "Get some sleep, kid," he said. "We have a war to start in the morning." He stepped out into the cool night air, where his car was waiting. I stood in the yellow light of the kitchen, listening to the engine fade away. I looked down at my red, raw hands. I looked at the phone screen still glowing with the evidence of my servitude. I picked up the phone. I opened my banking app. I found the recurring transfer scheduled for the 1st of the month, the one labeled Dad, Mortgage Help. I pressed cancel. Then I found the one for the 15th, cancel. I stared at the screen. It was a small action, a few taps of glass. But as the confirmation message popped up, recurring transfer deleted, I felt a rush of adrenaline so sharp it made me dizzy. I turned off the kitchen lights, leaving the room in darkness. I did not lock the back door for them. I did not check the stove twice. I walked out to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement, and for the first time in my life, I did not look back at the house. I drove home in silence, but the air in the car did not feel heavy. It felt electric. I was not the maid anymore. I was the CEO of a new corporation, and my partner was an 80-year-old man with a cane and a grudge. When I got to my apartment, the elevator was broken, as always. I walked up the 4 flights of stairs. My legs burned, but I did not mind. Every step felt like I was climbing out of a deep, dark well. I unlocked my door, stepped into my sanctuary, and locked the deadbolt. I sat on my cheap sofa and opened my laptop. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it simply, Project Payback. Then I started typing. I typed out everything I had told Victor. I typed out dates. I typed out memories. I was creating a deposition, a manifesto, a weapon. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dale. "Hey Harp, thanks for cleaning up. We appreciate it. Also, Jake needs a new laptop for school. His crashed. Can we talk about a loan on Monday?" I looked at the message. Usually, panic would set in. I would start calculating what I could cut from my grocery budget. I would start composing a polite, apologetic text asking if he could wait a week. Tonight, I just stared at it. I did not reply. I did not feel guilty. I felt a cold, calm clarity. No, I thought, we cannot talk about a loan. I put the phone face down on the table. I went to my bedroom, crawled under my quilt, and for the first time in 14 years, I fell asleep without worrying about tomorrow. Tomorrow was already taken care of. Tomorrow, I was going to war. The drive to my grandfather's house that Sunday morning felt less like a family visit and more like a commute to a war room. The adrenaline from the night before had faded, replaced by a cold, hard knot of anxiety in my stomach. The sun was shining brightly on the highway, but my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Victor lived in a small, mid-century bungalow about 2 hours north of the city. It was modest, the kind of house you retire to when you want to disappear, but when I walked inside, carrying my laptop and a box of old bank statements, the atmosphere was anything but retiring. Victor was sitting at his dining table, which was covered in papers. He was wearing a crisp button-down shirt, and his reading glasses were perched on the end of his nose. He looked like the businessman he had been 40 years ago. Not the frail stroke victim Candace liked to describe. "Sit down. Harper," he said, pointing to the chair opposite him. "We have work to do." He pushed a cup of black coffee toward me. It was strong, bitter, and exactly what I needed. "We are not doing this to be cruel," he started, his voice steady and devoid of the emotion that had fueled our conversation the night before. "We are not doing this to teach them a lesson. We are doing this to correct a structural failure in this family." He laid his hand flat on a stack of documents. "Currently, the power dynamic is entirely in their favor. They have the emotional leverage. They have your guilt. And until last night, they had access to my assets through manipulation. Today, we shift the weight." He outlined the plan. It was not a dramatic, screaming confrontation. It was a surgical removal of their resources. "Step 1, he said, looking me dead in the eye. "You stop the flow. Today." I swallowed hard. I knew this was coming, but hearing it said aloud made my chest tighten. "Grandpa," I said, my voice small, "if I just cut them off, the chaos it will cause. They rely on that money for the bills, the electricity, the insurance. If I stop paying, things will get turned off. They will say I am ungrateful. They will tell everyone I am a bad daughter. Victor leaned forward. Harper, listen to me. You are not their parent. You are their child. You have reversed the roles for so long that you think keeping the lights on in their house is your job. It is not. He took a sip of his coffee. And as for being called ungrateful, they are already calling you a maid. They are already laughing at you to your face. They call you ungrateful whenever you hesitate to write a check. At least if you stop paying, the name-calling will be free. He was right. I knew he was right. But the programming of 14 years is not deleted in a single conversation. I felt a wave of nausea at the thought of the phone calls that would come. This is not punishment. Harper, he added, softening his tone slightly. This is protection. You are protecting your future. You are 32. You have no retirement savings because you are funding their lifestyle. You drive a 6-year-old car because you bought Jake a dirt bike. This stops now. Step 2, he continued, moving to the next point, evidence. I need you to go through every text message, every email, every voicemail from the last 5 years. Anything where Candace uses guilt to get money. Anything where Dale promises to pay you back. Any document they made you sign. Why? I asked. Are we suing them? Victor shook his head. No, we are building a shield. When the trust is finalized, and they realize they have been cut out, they will attack. They will claim I am incompetent. They will claim you manipulated me. We need proof that the manipulation went the other way. We need to show a pattern of financial abuse that dates back a decade. He tapped the table. I want screenshots. I want dates. I want it organized. Can you do that? I nodded. I was good at organization. It was the one thing I could control. Yes, I said, I can do that. Step 3, he said, resting his hand on a thick blue folder. The trust. He opened the folder. It was full of legal jargon, paragraphs of dense text that I could barely parse. I am seeing my attorney, Mrs. Anders, on Tuesday, he explained. We are finalizing the Harper Ellison Trust. It is an irrevocable trust. Do you know what that means? I shook my head. It means once it is signed, it is set in stone. I cannot change it back if Candace cries. I cannot change it if Dale begs. And most importantly, the assets in the trust, my house, my savings, my remaining stock portfolio, bypass probate, they do not go through the will. They go directly to the beneficiary. He looked at me. You. I felt a flush of heat rise in my cheeks. Grandpa? No, I cannot take your money. It feels like I'm stealing from my dad. He is your son. Victor sighed, a long, weary sound. Harper, the robbery has already happened. They have been stealing from me for years, using you as the excuse. They have been stealing from you for years, using family as the excuse. All I am doing is putting the vault in a place they cannot reach. He closed the folder. If I leave this money to Dale, it will be gone in 5 years. Candace will spend it on renovations and vacations, and they will still come to you for their electric bill. If I leave it to you, it is safe, and if you want to help them later, on your terms, you can, but you will hold the checkbook, not them. He let that sink in. The power shift he was describing was dizzying. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through my bank statements. Victor was ruthless. He pointed out every discrepancy, every loan that had no repayment schedule. By the time I drove home that evening, my head was pounding, but my resolve had hardened into something brittle but sharp. I got back to my apartment at 8 o'clock. The silence of my living room felt different tonight. It felt heavy with anticipation. I sat down at my small desk and opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account. My hands were shaking, actually shaking. I had to clasp them together for a moment to stop the tremors. It was ridiculous. I was a grown woman. It was my money. But the fear was primal. It was the fear of the child waiting for the other shoe to drop. I navigated to the Transfers tab. There they were, the 3 pillars of my servitude. Recurring transfer, Mom and Dad. Utilities, $200, monthly, recurring transfer, grocery supplement, $150, biweekly, recurring transfer, Savannah tuition help, $300, monthly. I stared at the total, nearly $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. I hovered the mouse over the cancel button for the utilities transfer. "You are a bad daughter," a voice in my head whispered. It sounded like Candace. "After everything we did for you." "No," another voice answered. It sounded like Victor. "You are protecting your future." I clicked. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer?" I clicked yes. The line item vanished. I took a breath. I moved to the next one. The groceries. "They will starve," the panic whispered. "Dale will be embarrassed at the checkout." "They are adults," I told myself. "Dale has a job. Candace has wine in the fridge." Click, yes. The last one, Savannah's tuition help. This one was harder. Savannah was just a kid. Really. But then I remembered her laughing at me yesterday. I remembered her stepmother's voice saying, "The help clears the plates," and Savannah not even looking up from her phone. She has parents. I thought, it is their job to pay for her school, not her sister's. Click, yes. It was done. I sat back in my chair, waiting for the world to end, waiting for my phone to ring instantly. But of course, it did not. The transfers were not due for another week. The bomb had been planted, but the explosion was delayed. I looked at my available balance. Next month, for the first time in my working life, that number would not plummet on the 1st. I opened a new tab. I went to a different bank, an online-only bank that I knew my father had never used. I opened a high-yield savings account. I needed a nickname for the account. I typed in Freedom. I transferred $50 into it, just to activate it. It was a small start, but it was mine. A secret Candace would never touch. The next week was a blur of anxiety and covert operations. I started the digital diary Victor had suggested. Every night, instead of doom-scrolling social media, I wrote, Monday, October 14th. Dale texted asking for extra money for gas. I said no. I said I had a car repair bill. Lie, but necessary. He sent a thumbs-up emoji, passive-aggressive. Wednesday, October 16th. Remembered the time Candace made me return my prom dress to pay for Jake's dental work. Wrote it down. Writing it down was excruciating, but it was also clarifying. Seeing the events in black and white, stripped of Candace's emotional spin, made me realize how insane it all was. I wasn't just helping, I was being harvested. I also did something I had never dared to do before. I used my company's employee assistance program to book a session with a therapist. I sat in a beige office, why was it always beige, and poured out a condensed version of my life to a woman named Dr. Evans. She listened quietly, taking notes. When I finished, she looked at me over her glasses. "Harper," she said gently, "you use the word strict to describe your stepmother. You use the word demanding to describe your financial situation. I want to offer you a different word." She paused. "Abuse." I flinched. "Abuse is hitting," I said automatically. "She hasn't hit me since I was 18. "Abuse is control," Dr. Evans said. "Financial abuse is a very powerful, very real form of domestic violence. Coercing an adult child to fund the household through guilt, manipulation, and fear is abuse. You have been in an abusive relationship with your parents for 14 years. Hearing it from a stranger, a professional, broke something open inside me. I cried. I cried for the 18-year-old girl who thought she had to pay to be loved. But they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a victim who was finally standing up. The month passed. The 1st of November arrived. I was at work, staring at a spreadsheet of ambulance routes, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dale. "Hey Harp, bank is acting funny? The utility transfer didn't go through. Can you resend? Electric bill is due tomorrow." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of impact. I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this with Victor. I had rehearsed it with Dr. Evans. I typed the reply. My fingers felt numb. Hi, Dad. It is not a bank error. I canceled the transfer. I can no longer support you guys financially. I have my own bills to cover. I stared at the message. It was polite. It was firm. It was true. I hit send. I put the phone face down on my desk. 3 minutes later, it buzzed again. Then again. Then it started ringing. Incoming call. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Incoming call. Candace. I let it go to voicemail. Then the texts started flooding in. Dale. What do you mean? Harper. This isn't a joke. The bill is $240. Candace. Harper, pick up the phone. I don't know what kind of game you are playing, but it is incredibly immature. We rely on that money. Candace. Are you seriously going to leave us in the dark? After everything we have done for you? Dale. Harp, please, just send it this one time. We can talk later. I watched the notifications stack up on my lock screen. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to fix it, to make the buzzing stop, to send the money and buy the peace. But I looked at the sticky note on my monitor. It was something Victor had said to me that Sunday. Peace bought with your own blood is not peace. It is surrender. I did not pick up the phone. I did not reply. At lunch, I went to my car and listened to the voicemails. Candace's voice was high and tight, the nice mom mask slipping completely. Harper, this is ridiculous. You are being incredibly selfish. We have guests coming this weekend. If the power gets cut, it is on your head. Do you hear me? It is on your head. Call me back immediately. Dale's voice was different. He sounded confused, almost hurt. Harp, it is Dad. Look, I don't know what is going on, but we really need the help. Just call me, okay? I deleted the voicemails. I did not save them. I did not need that energy on my phone. I sat in my car, the silence of the parking garage around me. I was trembling, a physical reaction to the conflict I had spent my life avoiding. But as the minutes ticked by and the sky didn't fall, the shaking started to subside. I checked my bank account. The $200 was still there. I transferred it to the Freedom account. I took a deep breath, started my car, and drove back to the office. I had survived the first wave, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the opening skirmish. The real war would start when they realized the tap wasn't just paused, it was welded shut, and when they found out about the trust, they wouldn't just send texts, they would come for me. But this time, I had the receipts, I had Victor, and for the first time, I had a balance sheet that was finally tipping in my favor. The silence I had purchased by cutting off the bank transfers did not last long. In fact, it was the calm before a very specific, very loud storm. When the initial shock of the declined payments wore off, Candace shifted tactics. She moved from angry texts to a campaign of emotional psychological warfare that was so targeted, so precise, it was almost impressive. It started with the voicemails. I was at work, sitting in a budget meeting for the upcoming quarter, when my phone vibrated against the table. Then again, then again. By the time I got back to my desk, I had 4 missed calls and a voicemail that was 3 minutes long. I put on my headphones, my stomach tightening with the old reflex of fear, and pressed play. Harper. Candace's voice crooned. It was her martyr mother voice, the one she used when she wanted an audience to pity her. I am just sitting here looking at the photo album from when you were a teenager. Do you remember the dress I bought you for your cousin's wedding? The blue one? I worked extra shifts to buy that for you. She had not worked extra shifts. My father had paid for it, and she had complained about the price for weeks. But facts did not matter to Candace. I just do not understand where this hostility is coming from, she continued, her voice cracking theatrically. I raised you like my own. Harper, when your mother passed, God rest her soul, I stepped in. I cooked for you. I cleaned for you. I sacrificed my own comfort to make sure you had a home. And now Now you abandon us over a few dollars? It breaks my heart. It really does. To be treated like a stranger after I gave you a mother's love. It is cruel. I deleted the message before it finished. The mother's love she spoke of was a bill of sale. She was trying to rewrite history, painting herself as the selfless savior and me as the ungrateful prodigal daughter. 10 years ago, that voicemail would have crushed me. I would have sent $500 just to stop the guilt. Today, I just felt a cold, dull anger. I opened my digital diary and typed, November 7th. Candace claims she bought the blue dress. Dad paid for it. She called me ungrateful for stopping the payments she demanded. Then came Dale. My father did not leave long voicemails. He sent short, sharp texts designed to hit the one target he knew I could not defend. My grandfather. Dad, Victor sounded weak on the phone today. He is worried about family unity. This stress you are causing is not good for his heart. Harper. Dad, if something happens to him because he is upset about this money fight, I hope you can live with yourself. I stared at the screen. He was taking the risk of his own father's health and placing it squarely on my shoulders. He was weaponizing a stroke victim to get his electric bill paid. I forwarded the screenshot to Victor. His reply came 2 minutes later. I am as healthy as a horse, and I am currently eating a steak. Ignore him. The third front of the war opened on social media. I did not follow Savannah or Jake on any platform. It was too painful to watch them spend my money on concert tickets and designer sneakers. But my cousin Emily did, and Emily, bless her messy heart, loved to send me screenshots. Savannah posted a status. Funny how some people get a little success and forget where they came from. Loyalty is expensive, I guess. Jake posted a photo of his empty gas tank with the caption, "When family leaves you stranded, real ones know who stays." They were vague enough to be deniable, but specific enough that every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the family group chat knew exactly who they were talking about. I was being publicly shamed by the very people whose lifestyles I had subsidized for a decade. But a strange thing happened amidst the noise. The more they screamed, the less I felt. Because for the first time in my adult life, I had money. It was not a fortune. It was just my own paycheck, fully intact. But the difference was staggering. 2 weeks after I cut them off, I paid off the remaining balance on my credit card. The debt I had carried since college, the one that started with Jake's basketball camp and snowballed from there, was gone. I stared at the zero balance on the screen for 10 minutes, tears pricking my eyes. It felt like setting down a heavy backpack I'd been hiking with for years. That weekend, instead of driving to the suburbs to clean Candace's house or run errands for my father, I did something for me. I signed up for a pottery class. It cost $150, exactly the amount I used to transfer for their grocery supplement. I sat at the wheel, my hands covered in wet, gray clay, and for 3 hours, I did not think about Dale's electric bill. I did not think about Candace's voicemails. I focused on the clay spinning between my fingers. I was making a bowl. It was lopsided and heavy, but it was mine. I was creating something, not cleaning up someone else's mess. On the way home, I stopped at a mattress store. My bed was 10 years old. A cheap, lumpy thing I had bought used. I laid down on a firm, high-quality mattress. It felt like floating. I bought it. I arranged for delivery. I swiped my card without checking my balance first, because I knew the money was there. That night, sleeping on the new mattress, I realized something profound. The silence in my apartment was not lonely. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a life finally beginning. Victor called me on a Tuesday night. His voice was low, businesslike. "It is done. Harper," he said. I sat up straight. "The trust?" "The trust is signed, sealed, and irrevocable," he confirmed. "The Harper Ellison Trust now holds the title to my house, my savings accounts, and my 40% stake in the equipment rental company." He paused, and I could hear him shuffling papers. "I appointed a corporate trustee, a third party. It costs a bit in fees, but it is worth it. It means that even if Dale bullies me, Even if Candace drugs me and drags me to a bank, I cannot give them the money. I literally do not have the authority to withdraw the principal without the trustees' approval, and the trustees' only mandate is to act in your best interest. The relief was physical. It washed over me like cool water. Does Dad know? I asked. No, Victor said, a dry chuckle in his voice. And that is where it gets interesting. Candace has been calling me every day. She is suddenly very concerned about my affairs. She keeps suggesting that I should give Dale power of attorney, just in case something happens. She says it would be a burden off my mind. She thinks she is closing in for the kill. I said, a shiver running down my spine. Exactly, Victor said. She thinks I am a confused old man who is teetering on the edge. She wants to get the signature before I kick the bucket. She has no idea the bucket is already empty. Then, the universe threw a wrench into the gears. 3 days later, I got a call from the local hospital near Victor's house. My heart stopped. I thought it was the stroke. I thought I had lost him just as we were fighting back. I drove 2 hours and 90 minutes, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I burst into the emergency room, I found Victor sitting up in bed, looking annoyed, eating lime jello. He had fallen during a routine checkup at his cardiologist's office. He had felt dizzy, a minor arrhythmia. The doctor said, not a heart attack, and had stumbled. He was bruised, and they wanted to keep him overnight for observation. But he was alive. He was lucid. But to Candace, this was not a warning. It was an opportunity. She and Dale arrived an hour after me. Candace rushed into the room, her performance ready. "Oh, Daddy Victor," she cried, pushing past me to grab his hand. "We were so terrified. Dale nearly crashed the car getting here." Dale stood at the foot of the bed, looking pale. He looked at his father, connected to a monitor that beeped rhythmically. He looked at the mortality of the man who held the family fortune. "Dad," Dale said, his voice trembling, This is a wake-up call. We cannot keep pretending everything is fine. You are living alone up there. It is dangerous." Candace nodded vigorously, her eyes gleaming with predatory focus. "Dale is right. Victor, we need to handle this. We need to have a family meeting, an emergency meeting. We need to settle the legal side of things so we can take care of you properly." She turned to look at me, her eyes narrowing. "And Harper needs to be there," she said, her voice dripping with accusation. "Since she seems to think she is running the show now, we need to get everything on the table. Who is responsible for what? Who gets what?" She was pushing for the will. She wanted to lock down the inheritance before his heart gave out. She thought she could corner him in a hospital bed and bully him into signing over control to Dale. Victor looked at her. He looked at Dale. Then he looked at me. He winked. It was so subtle only I saw it. "You are right, Candace," Victor said, his voice sounding weaker than it actually was. He leaned back into the pillows. "I have been stubborn. We need to settle this." Candace's face lit up. She squeezed his hand. "Oh, Victor, I am so glad you are being sensible. We can do it this weekend. I will bring the notary." "No," Victor wheezed. "Not here. Not in a hospital. If we do this, we do it right." He took a breath. 2 weeks from Saturday," he said. "At my house, everyone comes. You, Dale, the kids, and Harper." "Perfect," Candace said, practically vibrating with victory. "We will be there." And Victor added, closing his eyes, "I will ask Mrs. Anders to come, my lawyer, to make it official." Candace hesitated for a fraction of a second, but her arrogance won out. She thought she could charm a small-town lawyer. She thought Dale's birthright trumped everything. "Of course," she said soothingly, "whatever makes you comfortable." The next 2 weeks were a surreal display of greed. The family group chat, which I had muted but not left, exploded with activity. Candace, finally getting things sorted with Grandpa. Everyone needs to be on their best behavior on Saturday. This is for the future of the family. Jake, does this mean I can finally get the truck? The transmission on the Honda is toast. Savannah, I am looking at condos near the university. If Grandpa helps out, I can stop living in the dorms. Dale, everyone calm down. We just need to make sure Dad is safe and his assets are protected from mismanagement. Mismanagement was his code word for me. They were carving up the carcass before the beast was even dead. They were spending money they did not have, banking on an inheritance that was already gone. Candace sent me a separate text. I hope you are prepared to apologize to your father on Saturday. If you want any part of this family going forward, you need to show some humility. I did not reply. I was terrified. My stomach churned every time I thought about that Saturday. I knew what was going to happen. I knew the explosion that was coming. I knew that when the truth came out, their rage would be nuclear. But then I would look at my new mattress. I would look at the lopsided clay bowl sitting on my counter. I would look at the zero balance on my credit card statement. I was scared. Yes, but I was also done. I replied to Candace with 2 words. I'll be there. I packed a bag for the weekend. I included my laptop, the digital diary, the spreadsheet of 5 years of payments, and a folder of printed bank statements. On Friday night, Victor called me. Are you ready, kid? He asked. I think so, I said, staring out my window at the city lights. They are going to hate us. Grandpa. They already hate us. Harper, he said gently. They just tolerate us because we pay the bills. Tomorrow, we stop paying, and then we will see who they really are. Get some sleep, he added. Mrs. Anders is bringing the paperwork. I am bringing the coffee. You just bring your spine. I hung up. I laid down on my new mattress, in the quiet of my own apartment. I closed my eyes. I visualized the kitchen table at Victor's house. I visualized Candace's face. I visualized the moment the house of cards would fall. Tomorrow, the war would end, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the rubble. I was ready to build something new on top of it. The Saturday of the meeting arrived with a sky so aggressively blue it felt like a spotlight. There were no clouds to soften the glare, no wind to break the silence. It was the kind of day that demanded the truth, whether you were ready for it or not. I parked my car next to my father's SUV in Victor's driveway. I took a moment to check my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was not wearing a hoodie today. I was wearing a navy blazer and a crisp white shirt, the kind of clothes I wore when I had to negotiate a contract with a hospital administrator. I was not here as the daughter. I was here as the plaintiff. I grabbed my laptop bag, which felt heavy with the weight of 5 years of evidence, and walked up the path. Victor's living room was small, but today it felt like a courtroom. He had pulled the curtains wide open, letting the harsh afternoon sun flood the space. There were no shadows to hide in. He sat in his favorite armchair, his cane resting against his knee, looking calm and dangerously alert. Next to him, in a straight-backed dining chair she must have pulled in from the kitchen, sat Mrs. Anders. She was a woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair cut into a sharp bob and a pair of reading glasses on a chain. On her lap sat a thick, organized file folder. She did not smile when I entered. She simply nodded, a professional acknowledgement of a co-conspirator. Candace and Dale were squeezed onto the love seat. Candace was dressed for the role of the concerned matriarch in a pastel cardigan and pearls. Her hands folded demurely in her lap, but her eyes were darting around the room, assessing the furniture, the silver tea set on the sideboard, calculating their value. She looked like she was already holding an estate sale in her mind. Dale looked nauseous. He was staring at his shoes, his shoulders hunched. He knew something was wrong. He knew his father well enough to know that the presence of a lawyer on a Saturday afternoon was never good news. Savannah and Jake were slouched on the floor, looking bored and irritated at having their weekend interrupted. Jake was tapping on his phone until Candace slapped his knee and hissed at him to put it away. "Thank you all for coming," Victor said. His voice was not the wheezy whisper he had used in the hospital. It was the voice of the man who had built a construction business from a single truck. "I know you are all busy." "We are never too busy for you, Dad," Candace said, beaming. "We just want to make sure you are settled, that you have peace of mind." "Peace of mind," Victor repeated slowly. "Yes, that is exactly what I want, and that is why I asked Mrs. Anders here. to ensure that everything is transparent. Candace squeezed Dale's hand. That is wonderful. Victor, Dale and I are ready to take on whatever responsibilities you need us to. We know it is too much for you to manage alone. Victor did not look at her. He looked at Mrs. Anders. Counselor, if you would. Mrs. Anders opened her file. She did not pull out a will. She pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind used for dictation. She placed it on the coffee table in the center of the room. Mr. Ellison asked me to review several pieces of media before drafting the current documents, Mrs. Anders said. Her voice was dry and devoid of emotion. Exhibit A. She pressed play. The sound was tinny but unmistakable. It was the ambient noise of a party, clinking glasses, low chatter, and then, cutting through it like a knife, came Candace's voice. Harper, from now on, you are the maid. My guests sit. The help clears the plates. The silence in the room was absolute. Candace froze. Her smile stuck in a rictus of horror. Dale's head snapped up. Savannah frowned, looking from the recorder to her mother. Mrs. Anders did not stop. She pressed a button to skip to the next track. This one was different. There was no party noise, just the echo of a hallway and a voice screaming in rage. If you want a roof over your head, you pay your way. You think you are special? You are nothing. Con daughters like you crawl back home eventually. It was the recording I had made on my phone during our last fight. The one right before I moved out of the house, echoing the words she had said when I was 18. Mrs. Anders clicked the device off. The silence stretched, tight as a piano wire. Well, Candace said, letting out a breathless, high-pitched laugh. I do not know where you got those. That is completely out of context. She looked around the room, her eyes wide and desperate. It was a joke, she said, gesturing wildly. The first one was a joke at the dinner party. Harper knows that. We have a dry sense of humor. And the second one, well, we were having a heated discussion about responsibility. Everyone loses their temper sometimes. You cannot possibly judge a lifetime of parenting on 2 snippets of audio. A lifetime of parenting, Victor said. He tasted the words like they were spoiled milk. Is that what you call it? I treated her like my own, Candace insisted, her voice rising. I gave her a home when she had no one. Mrs. Anders, Victor said, cutting her off. The spreadsheet, please. Mrs. Anders reached into her file and pulled out a stack of papers. She handed one copy to Dale, one to Candace, and one to the kids on the floor. This is a summary of financial transfers from Ms. Harper Ellison to the household of Dale and Candace Ellison over the last 5 years, Mrs. Anders said. I watched Savannah pick up the paper. Her eyes scanned the columns. What is this? Savannah asked, pointing at a line. Tuition? $300? That is the monthly contribution Harper made to your college fund, Mrs. Anders said. Your parents told you it came from your father's bonus. The records show it came directly from Harper's payroll deposit. Savannah looked at me, her mouth slightly open. You paid for my semester? I helped, I said quietly. I wanted to make sure you didn't have to take out loans. And here, Mrs. Anders continued, pointing to another section for Jake. The dirt bike, the insurance, the gaming setup, all funded by transfers from Harper. Wait, Jake said, sitting up. Dad said he worked overtime for the bike. Your father has not worked overtime in 4 years, Victor said. Harper worked overtime. Dale was turning a deep mottled shade of red. He was gripping the paper so hard it was crumpling in his hands. This is an exaggeration, Dale stammered. We borrow back and forth. Families do that. We were going to pay her back. $34,000. Mrs. Anders read from the bottom line. That is the principal amount transferred in the last 60 months. There is no record of repayment, not a single cent. But that is not the most interesting part, Victor said. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto his son. Show them the other sheet. Mrs. Anders, the cross-reference. Mrs. Anders handed out a second sheet. This one was color-coded. On the left, she explained, are withdrawals from Mr. Victor Ellison's accounts. On the right are transfers from Harper Ellison. They are matched by date and stated purpose. She pointed to a highlighted row. Date, June 12th. Purpose, new roof for the family home. Cost, $6,000. She looked at Dale. Mr. Victor Ellison wrote a check for $6,000 for this roof. On the same day, Harper Ellison transferred $3,000 to Dale Ellison for help with the roof deductible. The total cost of the roof, per the contractor's invoice we obtained, was $5,500. The room seemed to lose its oxygen. You took money from both of them, Mrs. Anders stated flatly. You paid the contractor, and you pocketed the remaining $3,500. That was for incidental expenses, Candace cried out. The gutters, the cleanup. There were no gutters replaced, Victor said. I checked the invoice. You took the money and you went to Cabo 2 weeks later. I remember. You said you won the trip in a raffle. Dale made a small, choking sound. He looked at Candace. You said the roof cost $9,000. Candace whipped her head around to stare at him. Do not you dare put this on me. Dale, you signed the checks. Because you told me to, Dale shouted, his facade cracking. You handle the bills. You told me Dad gave us half and Harper gave us half. I did not know you were double billing them. Oh, please, Candace sneered. You enjoyed the margarita, didn't you? You didn't ask where the money came from when you wanted that new set of golf clubs? Stop it, Savannah yelled. She stood up, the paper shaking in her hand. Is this real? Did you guys seriously steal from Grandpa and Harper? It is complicated, Savannah, Candace snapped. You do not understand the cost of running a household. I understand math, Savannah shouted back, and I understand why Harper stopped paying. We are not done, Victor said. His voice was like a gavel. Mrs. Anders. Mrs. Anders reached into the folder and pulled out a single, laminated document. She held it up. 2 years ago, she said, my office received a copy of a power of attorney document granting Dale Ellison full control over Victor Ellison's assets in the event of incapacitation. It was signed by Victor Ellison and witnessed by a notary. Dale went pale. I never signed that, Victor said. I was in Florida visiting my sister that week. We had the signature analyzed by a forensic document examiner, Mrs. Anders said. It is a forgery, a clumsy one. She looked at Dale. Forging a legal document is a felony. Mr. Ellison, attempting to use it to access bank accounts, as you tried to do last week when your father was in the hospital, is fraud. Dale looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at Candace, terrified. She made me do it, he whispered. Excuse me? Candace gasped. She brought it home, Dale said, his voice rising in panic. She said you were getting old. Dad, she said we needed to be safe. She said she knew a notary who would stamp it for $50. I didn't want to. She said it was for your own good. You coward, Candace hissed. You spineless little coward. You were the one terrified he was going to write you out of the will. You begged me to fix it. Enough, Victor said. He did not shout. He just spoke the word, and it ended the bickering instantly. He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly, but he did not look away. I spent the last week thinking about what to do, Victor said. Part of me wanted to call the police. Fraud, theft, elder abuse, it is all there. He looked at his son. But you are my son, and I failed you. I let you believe that being weak was acceptable. I let you believe that you were entitled to things you did not earn. He turned to Candace. And you. I let you into this family because I thought you made him happy. I didn't realize I was letting in a parasite. Candace opened her mouth to speak, but Victor held up a hand. The power of attorney is void. The old will is destroyed. I burned it myself. Victor, please, Candace said, her voice shifting into a desperate, wheedling tone. We can explain. We can make it right. We are family. We are, Victor said. And that is the tragedy of it. He nodded to Mrs. Anders. Tell them. Mrs. Anders placed the file on the table. She folded her hands. 6 months ago, Mr. Ellison established the Harper Ellison Irrevocable Trust, she announced. Dale blinked. Trust? The assets of Victor Ellison, Mrs. Anders continued, including this property, his liquid savings, and his 40% share in Ellison Equipment Rentals, were transferred into the trust on May 1st. She looked at me, then back at them. The sole beneficiary of the trust is Harper Ellison. The room went dead silent. What? Candace whispered. Harper owns this house, Victor said calmly. Technically, she has owned it for 6 months. She owns the company shares. She owns the savings. You gave everything to her? Dale asked, his voice trembling. Everything? I secured it, Victor corrected. I put it in the hands of the only person in this room who knows how to work for $1 and who has never asked me for a penny. But that is my inheritance, Candace screamed. She stood up, knocking the coffee table with her knee. The recorder rattled. You cannot do that. Dale is your son. He is the rightful heir. There is no such thing as a rightful heir, Victor said coldly. There is only what I choose to do with what I built. This is undue influence, Candace shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. She manipulated you. She poisoned you against us. I will sue. I will drag this through court for years. You can try, Mrs. Anders said calmly, but the trust is irrevocable. It was established while Mr. Ellison was of sound mind and body, with 2 independent medical evaluations attached to the document. And given the evidence of financial abuse and attempted fraud we have just presented, evidence we are happy to provide to a judge, I would strongly suggest you do not open that door. Candace looked at the lawyer. She looked at the recordings. She looked at the spreadsheet. She realized, with dawning horror, that she was not just beaten, she was disarmed. She turned to Dale. Do something! Say something! Dale looked at his father. He looked at me. He saw the way I was sitting. Straight, calm. No longer the girl in the hoodie hiding in the kitchen. Dad, he whispered, how are we supposed to live? We have the mortgage, the cars. You have jobs, I said. It was the first time I had spoken since the beginning. My voice was steady. You are both able-bodied adults. You have incomes. You just do not have mine anymore, and you do not have Victor's. Harper, Dale pleaded, his eyes filling with tears. We are drowning. Then learn to swim, I said. I did. Savannah stood up. She walked over to where I was sitting. She didn't look at her parents. Does this mean I can't finish school? She asked, her voice small. I looked at my sister. She was spoiled. Yes, she had been cruel, but she was also a product of them. The trust has provisions for education, Mrs. Anders interjected softly. Direct payments to the institution, subject to GPA requirements and approval by the trustee. I looked at Savannah. If you want to go to school, the trust will pay the university, not Mom, not Dad, the school, and you will maintain a 3.0 GPA, and you will apologize. Savannah looked at me. She looked at the spreadsheet where I had tracked every dollar I spent on her. She started to cry. I am sorry, she sobbed. I am so sorry, Harper. I nodded. I know, I said. I stood up. I walked over to Candace. She was trembling with rage, her face blotchy. This isn't over, she spat at me. You think you have won? You have nothing. You are alone. I am not alone, I said, looking at Victor. And I am not the maid, not anymore. I turned to Dale. You need to leave, I said. This is my house now, and I have a lot of cleaning up to do. Dale looked at Victor, begging for a reprieve. Victor just pointed his cane at the door. You heard the owner, Victor said. Get out. Candace grabbed her purse. She marched to the door, head high, clinging to the last shreds of her delusion. Dale followed, looking like a man walking to the gallows. Jake scrambled up and ran after them, terrified of being left behind. Savannah hesitated. looked at me one last time, and then followed her brother, closing the door softly behind her. The silence returned to the living room, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was clean. Mrs. Anders closed her file. "I will file the final addendums on Monday," she said, standing up. "Well done, Victor, Harper." She shook our hands and left. I sat back down in the chair opposite my grandfather. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the floor. "You okay?" Victor asked. "No," I said honestly. "I feel like I just threw up." Victor chuckled. "That is the adrenaline leaving the body. It passes." He reached across the gap and patted my hand. "They are going to be angry for a long time," he said. "I know," I said. "But they are going to be angry in their own house, paying their own bills," Victor said. "And we are going to order pizza." I laughed. It was a shaky, wet sound, but it was real. "Pizza sounds good," I said. "With extra cheese," Victor added, "since you are paying." "I am paying?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Hey," Victor grinned, tapping the table. "You are the one with the trust fund now. I am just a poor old man." I looked at him, and for the first time in 14 years, the future didn't look like a tunnel. It looked like a wide-open road. "Deal," I said. "But I am picking the toppings." The silence that followed Mrs. Anders' revelation did not last. It was shattered by a sound that was raw, ugly, and entirely devoid of the polished veneer Candace had worn for 14 years. It was the sound of a cornered animal realizing the trap had already sprung. Candace lunged forward. She did not attack me physically, but her entire body vibrated with a chaotic, terrified energy. She slammed her hand onto the coffee table, sending the little digital recorder skittering across the polished wood. "This is illegal!" she screamed, her voice shredding the quiet afternoon air. "This is fraud. He is senile. Look at him. He is an 80-year-old man who just had a stroke. He does not know what he is signing." She whirled on me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You did this. You poisoned him. You whispered in his ear while he was sick and confused. You took advantage of a vulnerable old man to steal our inheritance. I will have you arrested. I will have this entire trust thrown out in court." Mrs. Anders did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She simply reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out another document, sliding it across the table with the calm precision of a surgeon. "I expected this reaction," Mrs. Anders said, her tone cool and professional, "which is why we took precautions." She tapped the document with a manicured fingernail. "This is a certificate of independent review," Mrs. Anders explained. "Before Mr. Ellison signed the trust document 6 months ago, he was evaluated by Dr. Aris, a board-certified geriatric psychiatrist, and Dr. Liu, his neurologist. Both of them interviewed him separately, without Harper present, and without me present. They both attested, in writing, that Victor Ellison is fully cognizant, oriented to time and place, and acting of his own free will, free from undue influence." She looked at Candace over the rim of her glasses. "You can sue, Mrs. Ellison, anyone can sue, but you will be suing against the sworn testimony of 2 medical specialists and a court-appointed officer. You will lose, and you will spend the little money you have left on legal fees." Candace stared at the paper. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The legal wall was too high, and she knew it. Dale, who had been staring at the floor as if hoping a hole would open up and swallow him, finally spoke. He looked up, his eyes wet and red-rimmed. He looked at his father, not with anger, but with a pathetic, pleading desperation. "Dad," he choked out. "Why? Why would you do this to us? I am your son." Victor looked at him. His expression was not angry anymore. It was just incredibly weary. "Because I had to stop you. Dale, I had to stop you from eating your own child alive." "I was not," Dale protested, his voice cracking. I was doing what I had to do. You do not know how expensive it is. Dad, the house, the cars, the kids. I was just trying to keep the family afloat. I did what was necessary to keep a roof over our heads." He gestured wildly at me. "I was not stealing from her. We are a family. Families pitch in. I would have paid her back eventually. I just needed time." Something inside me snapped. It was a quiet snap, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. I had sat silent through the accusations. I had sat silent through the lies. But I would not sit silent while he rewrote history to make himself a martyr. "Eventually," I repeated. The word hung in the air. I stood up. I was not shaking. I felt a strange, icy calm settling in my chest. I walked to the center of the room, standing between my father and my grandfather. "You needed time?" I asked, my voice level. "You have had 14 years. Dad, let us talk about what you did with that time." I looked at him, forcing him to meet my gaze. "February 4th, 4 years ago," I said. "You called me at work. You were crying. You said the transmission on the SUV had blown and you could not get to work. You said you would lose your job. I transferred $1,200 to you within the hour. I found out 2 weeks later that you traded the SUV in for a newer model the next day. You used my money for the down payment on a heated leather interior." Dale flinched. That was an investment in reliable transportation. "August 10th, 3 years ago," I continued, ignoring him. "Savannah made the cheerleading squad. You sent me a text saying the uniform and camp fees were $800. You said it would break her heart if she could not go. I paid it. I canceled my own dental appointment to pay it." I looked at Savannah. She was staring at me, her eyes wide. "I never knew that," she whispered. "Mom said the Booster Club gave us a scholarship." "Mom lied," I said simply. I turned back to Dale. "Last year, Jake got a speeding ticket, $350. You told me it was for a textbook. I paid it." I took a step closer to Candace. "And the groceries, every 2 weeks, $150. You told me you were struggling to put food on the table, but every time I came over for those mandatory dinners, you were drinking bottles of wine that cost $30 each. I was eating ramen noodles in my apartment so you could drink expensive red wine." "I treated you like a daughter!" Candace shrieked, interrupting me. She stood up, her face blotchy with rage. "How dare you count pennies with me? I took you in. I raised you. I gave you a mother's love when you had nothing. I washed your clothes. I cooked your meals. I treated you exactly the same as I treated Savannah and Jake." "That is enough," Victor said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that stopped Candace mid-breath. Victor gripped his cane and pushed himself to his feet. He stood tall, swaying slightly, but his eyes were blazing. "You treated her like a daughter?" Victor asked, his voice trembling with suppressed fury. "Is that what you call it?" He looked at Candace with absolute disgust. 2 weeks ago," Victor said. "I walked into your house. I came in through the front door. It was quiet. You did not hear me. You were in the living room. You were shouting at Harper." Candace paled. She remembered the night. She remembered the interruption. "I saw you," Victor said, pointing a shaking finger at her. "I saw you walk up to her. I heard you call her a maid, and then I saw you raise your hand." The room went deathly silent. Savannah and Jake looked at their mother with horror. "You were going to hit her," Victor said. "A 32-year-old woman. You raised your hand to strike her across the face because she did not clear a plate fast enough." I was not," Candace stammered, backing away. "I was just gesturing." "You were going to hit her," Victor repeated, and the way Harper flinched, the way she froze, that was not the reaction of someone who was seeing it for the first time. That was muscle memory. That was fear. He turned to look at me, his eyes softening. "That was when I knew," Victor said softly. "I had suspected the money. I had suspected the emotional blackmail. But when I saw that, when I saw you ready to beat her in her own mother's house," he looked back at Dale. "That is when I knew every story you told me about Harper being difficult or troubled was a lie. You were not protecting her. You were breaking her." Dale put his head in his hands. He could not look at his father. He could not look at his children. Savannah stood up slowly. She looked at her mother as if she were seeing a stranger. "You hit her?" Savannah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You told us Harper was just dramatic. You told us she was jealous of me. You hit her?" "It is complicated, Savannah," Candace snapped, but there was no power in her voice anymore. "You do not understand what she was like as a teenager." "I understand enough," Savannah said. She looked at me. "The bruises on your wrist before prom. You told me you fell carrying laundry." I nodded. "I did not fall." Jake, who had been silent the entire time, looked at the spreadsheet in his hand. He looked at the line item for his speeding ticket. He looked at the line item for his gaming console. "You paid for the Xbox?" he asked, looking at me. "Mom said she saved up for 6 months for that." "I paid for it," I said. Jake looked at his mother. The hero worship that had been in his eyes for 19 years flickered and died. Victor cleared his throat. He reached into his jacket pocket. "There is one more thing," he said. He pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed. "I wrote this 3 months ago," Victor said. "Right after I saw the lawyer, I wrote it to be read in the event of my death. I thought maybe my heart would give out before I could face you all. I am a coward at heart. You see?" He tore the envelope open. His hands were shaking, but he unfolded the letter with dignity. "But I am still here," he said, "so I will read it myself." He adjusted his glasses. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "To my granddaughter, Harper," Victor read. His voice was thick with emotion. "If you are reading this, I am gone, and I am sorry. I am sorry for the money, yes, but mostly, I am sorry for the silence." He looked up at me for a second, then back at the paper. "I saw the signs. Harper, 10 years ago. I saw the way Dale looked at you. I saw the way Candace spoke to you. I saw the sadness in your eyes at Christmas. But I did nothing. I told myself it was not my business. I told myself that intervening would cause a fight, and I was too old and too tired for a fight. I wanted peace more than I wanted your safety." Tears pricked my eyes. I bit my lip to keep from crying. "I let them use you." Victor continued reading. "I let them turn you into a servant because it was easier than confronting my son about his failures. I bought my own comfort with your suffering, and that is the greatest sin of my life." He lowered the paper. He looked at me, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Please forgive me," he whispered. "Oh, Grandpa," I choked out. I took a step toward him and took his hand. "There is nothing to forgive. You are here now. You saved me." "No," Victor said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the hammer." Candace watched this moment of connection, and it broke her. The realization that she had lost, not just the money, but the narrative, was too much. She could not be the villain. She had to be the victim. "This is sick," she screamed. "Look at you two, rewriting history to make us look like monsters. I gave everything to this family. I sacrificed my youth. I sacrificed my career." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are the one destroying this family. Harper, you could not stand that we were happy. You could not stand that Savannah and Jake had a future. So you poisoned Victor against us. You are stealing their future to pay for your revenge." She turned to Savannah and Jake. "She is stealing your inheritance. That money was for you, for your weddings, for your houses. She is taking it all because she is a bitter, lonely, selfish little spinster." The words hung in the air, ugly and poisonous. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had terrified me for half my life. The woman whose footsteps in the hallway used to make my heart stop. I felt nothing, no fear, no shame, no anger, just a profound, exhausting pity. "I am not stealing anything," I said. My voice was soft, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a bell. "I did not ask for the trust. I did not ask for the house. I just stopped paying." I took a breath. "I stopped paying for your wine. I stopped paying for your mistakes. I stopped paying for the privilege of being treated like a servant in my own home." I looked her dead in the eye. I am not stealing your future, Candace. I just quit my job as your maid. Candace gasped, recoiling as if I had slapped her. Dale stood up. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He looked at Victor. "Dad," he said, his voice a broken whisper. "Please, think about what you are doing. We cannot survive without help. You know that. We have debt. We have mortgages. If you cut us off, we lose everything." "You have your health," Victor said, his voice hard as flint. "You have your wife. You have 2 healthy children." "But the money," Dale pleaded. "The trust. It was supposed to be for all of us." Victor looked at his son. He looked at the man he had raised, the man who had let a stranger abuse his daughter for a comfortable life. "You had a trust, Dale," Victor said. "What?" Dale blinked, confused. "You had the trust of your father," Victor said. "And you had the trust of your daughter. You had 2 people who loved you and would have done anything for you." Victor leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Dale's. "You spent it all," Victor said. "You spent every ounce of our faith in you. You spent it on silence. You spent it on lies. And now, the account is empty." Dale stood there, swaying slightly. The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. He had not just lost the money, he had lost the people. "Mrs. Anders stood up. She smoothed her skirt and picked up the stack of files on the table. "I believe we are finished here," she said. She walked around the table and handed a thick envelope to Dale. "This is a copy of the trust agreement, outlining the transfer of assets. It also includes a formal notice to vacate the property owned by the trust, the small rental unit on Elm Street that you have been using for storage, within 30 days. She handed another envelope to Candace. "This is a copy of the forensic report regarding the forged power of attorney. Mr. Ellison has chosen not to press criminal charges at this time, provided there is no further harassment or contact regarding financial matters. If there is..." She let the sentence hang. She turned to Savannah and Jake. She did not hand them envelopes. She handed them business cards. "If you wish to apply for educational grants from the trust," she said kindly, "you may contact my office directly. Your parents will not be involved in the process." The finality of it was absolute. There was no room for negotiation. There was no room for tears. The law had spoken. The money had moved. Candace stood there, clutching the envelope, her knuckles white. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, searching for a weakness. She found none. Victor was looking out the window at the setting sun. I was standing beside him, my hand on his shoulder. Savannah and Jake were looking at their shoes, ashamed and confused. Dale was staring at the wall, a broken man. "Get out," Victor said softly, without turning around. It was not a shout, it was a dismissal. Candace let out a choked sob of rage. She turned and marched toward the door, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She did not look back. Dale hesitated for a second, looked at his father's back, and then followed her. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Jake looked at me. He looked like he wanted to say something, to apologize, to ask about the Xbox, but he didn't. He just shook his head and walked out. Savannah paused at the door. She looked at me, her eyes red. "I will call you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "About the application?" "Call the lawyer," I said gently. "Start there." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and closed the door behind her. The latch clicked shut. The sound echoed in the small room. "Mrs. Anders let out a long breath. She packed her briefcase, the sharp click of the locks sounding like the end of a sentence. "I will see you on Monday for the final signatures." "Harper," she said. She gave Victor a small, rare smile. "Try to keep your blood pressure down. Victor?" "I will try," Victor grunted. "Now that the source of the pressure is gone." When Mrs. Anders left, the house fell silent. But it was not the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets. It was the tired, clean silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. I sat down on the sofa. My legs suddenly felt like jelly. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. "We did it," I whispered. Yeah, Victor said. He sat back in his armchair, looking older but lighter. We did it. He looked over at me. They are gone, Harper, really gone. They cannot hurt you anymore, and they cannot spend a dime that isn't theirs. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling. I thought about the spreadsheet. I thought about the blue dress. I thought about the night in the hallway. I searched for the word. Empty. That is good, Victor said. Empty means you have room to put new things in. He pointed his cane at the kitchen. Now, he said, his voice returning to its usual gruff warmth, I believe we discussed pizza, and since you are the tycoon now, I want pepperoni and mushrooms. None of that vegetable nonsense. I laughed. It started as a small chuckle and grew until my chest shook with it. It was a release, a purging of 14 years of held breath. Pepperoni and mushrooms, I agreed, pulling out my phone. And maybe a bottle of wine, a cheap one, just because we can. That, Victor said, closing his eyes with a smile. Sounds like the best investment you have made all day. 3 weeks after the meeting that dismantled my family, I stood in the foyer of Victor's house, my house, and watched a burly mover carry my lopsided pottery bowl inside like it was a very delicate antique vase. Be careful with that one, I said, trying to suppress a smile. It is a custom original. The mover grinned and set it gently on the mantel, right next to a framed photo of my grandmother. The house was in chaos, but it was a happy chaos. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. My meager furniture from the apartment was being integrated with Victor's solid oak pieces. It was a merging of two lives that had both been lonely and were now finding a new rhythm together. Victor was supervising the setup of his new room. We had converted the large, sun-drenched den on the ground floor into a bedroom suite for him. It had French doors that opened onto the garden and a bathroom attached. It was safer than the stairs, and he claimed he preferred being close to the kitchen anyway. I am the best tenant you will ever have. Harper, he announced, leaning on his cane as he directed the placement of his reading chair. I pay my rent in stories, and I never play loud music after 8 o'clock. And you do the dishes on Tuesdays, I added, unpacking a box of books. Victor chuckled. I will negotiate that clause later. The atmosphere was light, lighter than air, but outside these walls, the reality for Dale and Candace had crashed down with the weight of a collapsing building. Without the monthly transfers from me, and without access to Victor's accounts, their house of cards had folded in record time. They could not afford the mortgage on the sprawling suburban house Candace loved so much. Not without the incidental funds they had been skimming. They had put it on the market in a panic, asking for a quick sale. They were currently living in a 2-bedroom rental apartment on the south side of town. It was a perfectly adequate place, clean and functional, but to Candace, it was a gulag. Savannah and Jake had been forced into a brutal collision with reality. The trust officer Mrs. Anders had appointed was strict. She had approved tuition payments directly to the university for Savannah, but she had rejected the request for a living allowance and a new car. Savannah was now working evenings at a coffee shop to pay for her gas and textbooks. Jake had taken a job at a landscaping company to pay off his truck. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from my cousin Emily, who was enjoying the drama a little too much, that the mood in their new apartment was toxic. Candace spent her days crying about injustice, and Dale spent his evenings staring at the wall, wondering how he had let it get this far. I did not feel happy about their misery. I did not feel a surge of vindictive glee. I just felt a polite, distant sense of cause and effect. They had spent 14 years planting these seeds. Now they were eating the harvest. Savannah had sent me a text a few days ago. Hey Harper, just wanted to say thanks for the tuition thing. The lawyer explained it. I am sorry about everything. Mom is being crazy. It was not a profound apology. It was half-hearted, driven mostly by the relief that she could still go to college. But it was a start. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and left it at that. I was not ready to be friends. I was content to be a benevolent, distant benefactor. By 6 o'clock, the movers were gone. The house was quiet. I went into the kitchen, this room, which had been the stage for my humiliation at Candace's house, was different here. It smelled of old wood and lemon polish. It was a workspace, yes, but it was a warm one. I opened the wooden recipe box that had belonged to my grandmother. It was stuffed with index cards written in fading blue ink. I pulled one out. Beef stew with dumplings. Victor walked in, the tap of his cane rhythmic on the tile. "What is on the menu? Landlord?" he asked. "Stew," I said. If I can decipher this handwriting, Grandma wrote her teaspoons and tablespoons exactly the same way. Victor laughed. "She cooked by feel, not by chemistry. Just throw it in. If it tastes bad, we will order pizza." We spent the next hour chopping vegetables side by side. I peeled the carrots. Victor sat at the table and diced the potatoes. His movements slow but precise. We talked about nothing. We talked about the weather. We talked about the bird feeder in the backyard. It was the most normal, boring, wonderful hour of my life. Then, the doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a long, insistent press. Victor frowned, his knife pausing over a potato. "Who is that?" I wiped my hands on a towel. I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who it was. "Stay here. Grandpa," I said. "I will handle it." I walked to the front door. I turned on the porch light and looked through the peephole. Candace. She was standing on the mat, looking disheveled. Her hair was not perfectly sprayed. Her coat was buttoned wrong. She looked like a woman who was fraying at the edges. I took a deep breath. I opened the door, stepped out onto the porch, and pulled the door firmly shut behind me. I would not let her toxic energy into my sanctuary. "Hello, Candace," I said. "Harper," she breathed, her eyes wide and glassy. She smelled faintly of white wine. I needed to talk to you, alone, without the lawyers, without the noise." "We have nothing to talk about," I said calmly. "Mrs. Anders handles all communication now." No, she said, waving a hand dismissively. "This is not about legal stuff. This is about family." She took a step closer. I stood my ground. "I know you're angry. Harper, I get it. We were hard on you. We expected a lot. But that is because we saw potential in you. We wanted you to be tough." I stared at her. The revisionist history was breathtaking. "You wanted me to be tough so I could work harder for you," I corrected. Candace's face crumbled. Tears, sudden and practiced, welled up in her eyes. "How can you be so cold?" she sobbed. "Your mother. Oh, God. Your poor mother. If she could see this, if she could see you throwing your father out on the street, she would be ashamed of you. Harper. She would be heartbroken." It was a low blow, the lowest she could possibly aim. She was trying to use the ghost of the woman she had replaced to shame me into compliance. A month ago, that would have destroyed me. A month ago, I would have crumbled. Today, I felt nothing but disgust. My mother would be proud that I finally stood up to a bully. I said. Candace's eyes narrowed. The tears vanished instantly, replaced by a flash of the old anger. "You are not the victim here," she hissed. "You think you are so perfect? You are selfish. You abandoned us. Dale is falling apart because of you. He is depressed. He can barely get out of bed. That is on you. Harper, that is your fault." "It is not my fault," I said. "It is his consequence." Candace let out a frustrated growl. She stepped forward again, her hand raising instinctively, reaching for my arm. It was the old move, the grab, the squeeze, the physical intimidation she had used a dozen times in hallways and kitchens to force me to listen. I saw the hand coming. I did not flinch. I did not freeze. I took one deliberate step back. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was not loud. It was not a scream. It was a command, delivered with the absolute authority of someone who owns the ground she is standing on. Candace froze. Her hand hovered in the air, inches from my sleeve. I looked her in the eye. "Do not ever touch me again," I said. "Those days are over. You do not get to grab me. You do not get to hit me. You do not get to intimidate me." I pointed to the driveway. If you want to have a relationship with this family, you will learn respect, you will learn boundaries, and if you cannot do that, then you will have silence. Absolute, permanent silence. Candace stared at me. She looked at my face, searching for the scared girl she had dominated for 14 years. She looked for the apology. She looked for the flinch. She found a woman who was looking back at her with eyes that were clear and unafraid. She realized, in that moment on the porch, that her power was gone. It had evaporated the moment I stopped believing I deserved her abuse. She lowered her hand, her face twisted into a snarl of impotent rage. "You will regret this," she screamed, backing away down the steps. "You will be lonely. You will die alone in this big house with that old man. You are nothing." She turned and stumbled toward her car, shouting threats about lawsuits she could not afford and vengeance she could not exact. I watched her get into her car. I watched her slam the door. I watched her reverse out of the driveway, tires spinning on the gravel, and speed away into the night. I stood there for a moment in the cool evening air. I listened to the sound of the crickets. I looked at the moon hanging over the roof of my house. I felt lighter. The last thread of fear had just snapped. I turned around and opened the front door. Victor was standing in the hallway, leaning on his cane, looking concerned. He had heard the shouting. "Is the storm over?" he asked quietly. I smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached all the way to my heart. It blew itself out. I said, I locked the door. I threw the deadbolt. It was a satisfying, solid click. We went back to the kitchen. The stew was bubbling on the stove, filling the room with the rich, savory scent of beef and herbs. It smelled like home. Not the performance of a home that Candace had curated, but a real, messy, warm home. I went to the cabinet and took out 2 bowls. I took out 2 spoons. I ladled the stew. I carried the bowls to the small kitchen table where Victor was sitting. I sat down across from him. "This looks terrible," Victor joked, looking at the lopsided dumplings. "It is going to be delicious, I promised." I picked up my spoon. For 14 years, I had eaten standing up. I had eaten the leftovers off the plates I was clearing. I had eaten alone in my room after everyone else was finished. I had been the last priority in my own life. Tonight, in the house that protected me, with the grandfather who loved me, I dipped my spoon into the broth. I took the first bite. It tasted like freedom. I was not the maid. I was not the bank. I was Harper Ellison. And I was finally full. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please leave a comment below letting me know where you are tuning in from and what you thought of Harper's journey. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, hit the like button, and press the hype button to help this story reach even more people.